Hi, I think we're live. Sounds like it. Oh, I see my neighbor. I see lots of familiar names, some names I don't know. As you're filing in, if you would please use the chat and tell us where you are. Um, you can use that in any sense of the word, meaning where are you physically, where are you emotionally. Um, I am, as you could, oh, anyway, enjoy reading that because I have to say, I always do. It is a thrill to see how far and wide, right, emotionally, why not? Um, I'm in my apartment in New York, so this is a little bit different from the ones that we did in the depths of the COVID quarantine when I was in Connecticut. We're back in New York. My son is in school, mostly in person, although remote this week. So forgive me, him, if you hear that. My husband's also working from home. So we'll just, we'll keep it real. Um, I thought it would be a nice time to gather because we hadn't done anything yet in 2021. And you know me, I always like to prepare a good PowerPoint. I like to be organized. I like to share things visually, but also it seemed more urgent just to have an opportunity to get together, to talk about what's on our mind. And for me, a huge part of what's on my mind, yes, my MoMA swan song, is the fact that in early May, I will be leaving the museum after a wonderful career that I have enjoyed so much. This course and all of you have been a huge part of that. Seeing through photographs really changed my sense of why I care about talking about photographs with broader audiences. So thank you to all of you. Okay, wait, I forgot though. Before we get going on all of that, I have some business to report. For starters, this is going to be 1 hour long. So we're going to go until 2:30 and we will record this, although if I end up saying too many things that I didn't mean to say, then we will never share it with anyone. But assuming it goes according to plan, we'll put it up on the course afterward. Then throughout the session, the chat is live and active, as you can see. You can post new questions in there. We also received a number of good questions from you all in advance, and I'll start with those. And when we read your question, if you feel like being unmuted and asking it yourself and having a little conversation as I answer it, you can just raise your hand and our AV team, Mike and Howie, will find you and unmute you or invite you to be unmuted. And if you want to, you can join me. I would love it. But you should feel no pressure. If you're feeling shy and you just want to ask your question, that's also totally fine. This is recorded. But again, if we really don't like the recording, we'll never share it with anyone. So there is also an opportunity to have a live transcript, closed captioning, and that is at the bottom right of your screen. So one of the things I love is that a number of people take this course in order to practice their English, which is perfectly fine. I don't take offense to that. But the live closed captioning probably will be useful to you in that. And those are all the business items I have. So I thought I would begin by just saying, yes, I will be leaving the museum. May 10th will be my first day at Aperture. And for those of you who don't know, Aperture is an organization that is dedicated to supporting photography and photographers and to sort of broadening the dialogue around those, primarily through a magazine that was a quarterly magazine that was founded in 1952 by Dorothea Lange, no less, my favorite, and Ansel Adams and Minor White and a handful of other people as well. But they've also published a number of incredible books over the decades. Diane Arbus's first monograph that accompanied her exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, her posthumous retrospective. That is an Aperture book. Nan Goldin's Ballad of Sexual Dependency, Sally Mann's books. So Aperture has a long history of supporting photographers and doing projects with many that we talk about in the course all the time. So I think you can, you know what, I'll figure out. I suspect you could sign up for Aperture's newsletter, but I don't even know how to do that yet. So that's for another day. But today, also, we will make sure that, most important, you should know that Seeing Through Photographs is going to continue in a lively, wonderful manner, even without me. I may do a cameo from now, if I'm invited from time to time, but it will be in very good hands. The activations will be led by members of my curatorial team, many of whom you've met already, members of the education department. So don't worry, Seeing Through Photographs will continue to thrive, and you know, we hope you all continue to be a part of it. Then let's get to the questions. Why not? That's why we're here. So the first question was from Marta Bausels. Actually, I shouldn't say last name. Sorry, Marta. But Marta, if you would like to ask your question live, if you raise your hand, our AV team can invite you to unmute yourself. But if you don't do that, I can just read your question. So we'll give you a minute just to raise your hand if you want. Oh, hi. Whoops. I think I can't hear you. Are you unmuted? Okay, good. Believe me, the technical difficulties. I will say I wish I wrote it down. I listened to a talk the other night and someone said, please choose to be amused by any technical challenges we might face. And I thought that seems like a good rule of thumb these days. Just choose to be amused. We all know how these things happen. All right, well, while Marta is getting her audio unmuted, which I hope she can do, I'm going to start reading her question and start trying to answer it too. So she asked, what advice would you give early career photographers who have projects to release into the world, but don't know quite where to start? And she pointed out the distinction in the literary world where there are journals and things like that. She said she's struggling to find out what the equivalent would be for these journals in photography. Is it small galleries, online galleries? And she said, it worries me to think the answer would be, quote, just put it on social media and hope for the best. I understand, that's a worry. But as she said, I want my work framed carefully and in an artistic context. Is that naive in this day and age? And so first what I'll say is, it may be naive, but I think it's a great goal. Can you hear me now? Can I hear you?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
hi.
yeah.
No, believe. So
yeah.
Is there anything you want to change or add to your question as I attempt to answer it?
No, I'd love to. Thank you for reading it out. I'd love to just hear what you have to say. No, I think, yeah.
I mean, it's so. Yes. First of all, let me just say it's hard. If you want to know one of the reasons I love being a curator, it's because it's a lot easier than being an artist. So that you know, let's not have any confusion there. Especially because if you're really trying to make your best art, it's about yourself that you're putting out there, and so any rejection, which is sure to happen, I hate to say it, no matter how great of an artist you are, it would be very hard to not take that personally, even if it's meant in a constructive sense. So my advice would be to try, keep your goals. You know, they may be naive goals, but I think they're excellent ones, meaning trying to encourage your art to be understood in the context that you intend it to be. And for some artists, that is a more commercial context. For some artists, that's a more studio-based practice. For some, that can mean making a very personal statement that is intelligible to a smaller circle of people. And the smaller the circle of people that you're trying to touch with what you're doing, the harder it is to find that circle of people. So this is not my area of expertise, because the truth is, when I do portfolio reviews as a MoMA curator, I'm very conscious that the people who are paying to speak to me are not, no, sorry. I'm very conscious that no one pay to speak to me, because I know that the likelihood that as a MoMA curator that I will be able to help you directly at the moment in your career when it, is not likely. Whereas I think there are a number of platforms and programs. So I'm thinking of Silver Eye in Pittsburgh. I'm thinking of Lightwork in Syracuse. I'm thinking of Aperture, who they have a portfolio open that I have no idea how it works yet, but seems like a good idea. I'm sure in 6 months I'll be able to answer more about that. But to sort of look for platforms where they are committed to supporting emerging artists in the broadest sense of the word. And I guess that's really all I have to say, is that I don't know. It's a very good question. I don't think it should have to be reduced to Instagram, although, somebody's saying what Sally Mann's advice was. Sally said, first and foremost, do not try to act, or dress like an artist. Just be an artist. Thank you. That's a very good reminder. I should go watch that Sally Mann talk that we did last April. Oh, SF camera work, another good one. Thank you, Tabitha. Anyway, there are some opportunities. I can't say I think there are that many. Well, I should say there are probably countless, and I'm only aware of a small number. Photo review, Portland, Blue Sky in Portland. Okay, maybe there are a number. Maybe we should make a list. I'm making a note to myself. And maybe we can put it on Seeing Through Photographs. List of opportunities for emerging artists. So we're going to keep the chat. So anyone who has any other good ideas, I already see like 100 of them coming in. So thank you, Seeing Through Photographs community. Let's make a list of these and share them with Seeing Through Photographs learners, because you're definitely not the only one who is interested in this and who could benefit from it. So thanks for that great question. So Fatima asked this question, and it is, kindly tell us more. And Fatima, I don't want to reveal your last name unless you want to reveal your last name, but it starts with an A. Anyway, raise your hand if you want to be unmuted, and our AV team will find you. So Fatima asks, hi, Sarah, kindly tell us more about photography patterns and how you see modern photography, or you can say digital photography, which is more about Photoshop than the world itself. And to that, I will say, one of the privileges of being a curator, and I wonder how this is going to change when I start at Aperture, is that I don't forecast trends. I look around me, I look at artists, I look at magazines, and I look, yes, even at Instagram. I go to galleries, and I try to see what's around me and think what seems original, authentic, what interests me. Now, of course, I'm also interested in the past. And as anyone who takes Seeing Through Photographs knows, part of my mission has been, how do you put that past in dialogue with today? So now I'm going to take a moment to plug. Well, actually, can you hold on 1 second? I have the heater on and it's making me very warm. Oh my gosh, a million times better. Okay, so I am going to take the opportunity to plug my new project. This is the first hand-bound copy, so there'll be more eventually, of Photoclubismo. like this, which will be my last project at MoMA, but which I love so very, very much. And part of what I love about this project has been thinking about the past, in particular, this moment in Sao Paulo, Brazil, after the Second World War, where a group of amateur photographers joined to form a club called the Photo Cine Club Bandeirantes. Forgive my Portuguese pronunciation, but Photo Cine Club Bandeirantes. So this club was wildly successful by any measure in the 1950s. Their members were being awarded prizes in salons on 6 continents. One of their members, Thomas Farkas, had photographs in MoMA exhibitions in 1951 and 1959 in the museum collection. They were in dialogue with Otto Steinert and the subjective photographers. They were in dialogue with La Ventana, the Carpeta de los Dias, and other important photographic groups around South America. And yet, after decades in the field, I would say 10 years ago, I knew the name of precisely one of these members. And that led me, sorry, I am going to link this back to your question. Hold on, I'm going to look at your question one more time to make, just about trends, is in part what I think about is like, how do you make those historical trends matter today? And I think these were amateurs, which mean that they photographed in the evenings and on weekends. They were not professionals. They were not people who they considered themselves as making art, and they were very, very serious about that. But they were doctors and lawyers and bankers and accountants, and they had all kinds of different jobs that they did to make a living. And so when I think today about the billions of people on Instagram, it relates in an interesting way to the activities of these amateurs, meaning that they're in the sea of amateur photographers active in the middle of the 20th century. And it was a sea, just as there have been seas of amateur photographers active ever since the 1890s when Kodak introduced their #1 camera. But I think the opportunity to reflect on what that status meant for their recognition as artists today has been really important and interesting to me. So my feeling is sometimes what curators can do in particular, and who knows what I'm going to do as executive director, but one of the things that's defined what I've done as a curator is try to think, how can you use a historical example to reflect on what's happening today? And I believe that it's a curator's job to say, I think this work is more interesting than this work, or more valuable. And, not to put too fine a point on it, but why not? One of the things that I love about this club is that they made, alongside many pictures that I would consider modern masterpieces, they made lots of photographs of kittens and metaphors of flowers and smelling and candles being extinguished and misty landscapes and little girls with bows in their hair. And I would argue that these are hopelessly cliched, much like a lot of what I see on Instagram today. If you see another picture of, well, I'm not going to anyway. And yet, part of the challenge is to say, isn't it interesting to think of this medium of photography, this delightfully democratic medium, as having all of that in its grasp? So I believe in judgment that's anchored in research and in acknowledging how your own personal taste factors into it. There are things that I like and there are things that I don't like. And in part, grappling with that has been part of my own education, really. And so photoclubismo has been a really great opportunity for me to say, why do I like what I like, and how by those very opinions and by the work that I do with at MoMA, how is that creating hierarchies that might be leading to some of the structural inequities that we face in the world today? So as a MoMA curator, where am I damaging things? And how, what can I do to try to reassess and offer opportunities for other people to reassess, where taste and judgment should factor in and where they shouldn't. So anyway, thank you, Fatima, for that question. So Gianfranco S, feel free to, okay, is not here, but I'm going to answer his question quickly anyway. Thanks, Howie. He said, congratulations on your new position. Thank you. I would love to openly discuss the subject of awards or grants for relative newcomers in photography. And I think that we're going to, let's keep the chat going. Anyone who knows of good grants for emerging photographers outside the ones we've mentioned already, in some ways, the very platforms and organizations that do portfolio reviews, some of them also offer grants. Camera Club of New York, Baxter Street does that too. So these are resources that I think together we can probably come up with more than I could possibly come up with on my own, and we'll share it on the course. I would like nothing more to make something before I leave MoMA that helps the field and photographers who are emerging. So let's thank you all for these. Oh my gosh, somebody just, oh yeah. And by the way, this is what the discussion forums are for on Seeing Through Photographs, I should say. So Sarah's forum will probably be renamed, but we're gonna add a little bit more to it. And I hope that this is part of it. So thanks, Gianfranco. So there was another question of someone else who's not here. That says, why have you always preferred functional photographs over artistic ones? And this is a problem when you do things like office hours and you haven't scripted what you say, because you've probably said something that you'd like to contradict often. So I do have a strong affection for functional photographs because which is not to say that I don't also like photographs that were intended exclusively to be works of art exhibited on a museum wall. So I like both. But I do think that the functional photographs interest me because it's part of what's so great about photography. So just like those slews of amateurs that have enjoyed the medium for 130 years and more, let's say since the very beginning in terms of professionals, that idea of photography's multiplicity or plurality, that you can have photographs that serve very important social goals, that serve very important political goals, that were made for as a job, that were made as a hobby. It's hard to say really in any other medium that MoMA collects, perhaps other than design, that usefulness is a part of photography. And so I like that because to me that encapsulates what we were saying about that democratic principle, is that photography can mean so much to so many, and it operates in so many different registers and reaches so many different people, that if you're really intent on saying like, this is the only thing of value because it's art and everything else is somehow lesser or less interesting, then you're missing an opportunity to think about how great it is that so many millions of people around the world care about photography. So that's in a nutshell why I like functional photographs. Okay. So Sue M is here. And if she wants to raise her hand, She writes that she's always been a fan of Aperture. Thanks. um, and oh my gosh, this is really, I should have pre-read this question. How do you hope to put your own stamp on the organization of Aperture? And how does your MoMA experience impact that stamp? So Sue, feel free if you want to raise your hand and we can talk about this, or I will try to answer it without giving away all my secrets of how I actually applied for this job. So in terms of my job interview, someone wrote, yes, it feels like one. So I'll say this. First of all, working at MoMA it's hard to describe what a privilege that feels like. I can't imagine that I would have comparable opportunities at any other museum in the world, frankly. So it was I've never really even seriously considered that. I love working at MoMA. But when they called me about Aperture, I thought to myself, they need somebody to help them. First of all, they do a great job already. I personally subscribe to the magazine. It's one of the few that my husband doesn't make me throw out. I'm a little bit I would be a little bit more of a hoarder with that. But I keep all my old Aperture magazines. I have a lot of Aperture books in my library. So Aperture already is at a place in the field that I admire very much. I look to them for creative thinking, for pointing to the very trends that I was saying. I'm so bad at recognizing myself. And so when they called me, I was like, it's at least an organization that I'm interested in. And they need a few things that I'm hope that I can provide. So they need a new home. And it in the way I think of it, that home is both physical and digital. I heard somebody combine those two words recently, and I won't do it because I resist. I object. But so Aperture is going to need they rent their space now. They're going to need a new home, and that's going to be a big, exciting, different kind of thing that I've never tried to do. But I think partly that home is a digital home, is thinking about now to complement this great magazine that they publish and these important books that they publish. In what ways can digital platforms broaden the audience, broaden the conversation, invite more people in? And frankly, thanks to all of you, I might have a little bit of credibility in that. So I hope that what I will do for Aperture is to continue to amplify artists' voices, to continue to think with the people who work there about why photography matters in the world, and to think how can all of Aperture's platforms, including the digital ones, do that more and better and reach more people. So does that sound like my job interview? Kind of, a little bit. So that we'll see. I also should say, I haven't even started yet. I'm barely. So we'll talk, we'll find some way for me to communicate and how in the world I think I might do that, but I need a little more time. Okay, here are two questions that can be addressed together. The one is that someone named Keith, who I don't think is with us, asked an important question. He said, most photojournalism focuses on the major problems of our world, and there are indeed more than enough of them. And it is right that they are brought to our attention, and I totally agree. But he concludes his question with this. Do you think there is a future for a photographer who feels that he should concentrate on happier events and to focus on joy and beauty that we can enjoy in our lives on Earth? Okay, so, and then a related question from someone named Lynn G, Lynne. Lynn, I think you are here. So if you want to raise your hand and talk about this, I'd love it. Lynn asked, does a photograph today have to have social relevance about some issue, event, group to be worth seeing? Or can an image that is fun, pretty, interesting also be of worth and interest to others. So um, I'll say this oh, hi, Lynn.
Hello.
Sorry, am I scaring you? Um, so how about I'll give it a go for a minute and then you chime in and see if I've adequately answered your question or if you want to shift me in a different direction.
I'm very honored that you'd even consider it. So thank
No,
you.
it's a great question because I don't know if, do you remember Hank Willis Thomas? He features prominently in the course, and he is an artist, but he also considers himself an activist, and rightly so. He has an organization called Four Freedoms that thinks about the difference that photography and photographers can make in the world. But he also is involved with a group that he founded that is a revival of an 1860s group called the Wide Awakes. And the Wide Awakes are, oh God, okay, I'm not going to do justice to it in a 30-second clip. But partly what I love about the Wide Awakes is that they are interested in bringing civic activism and joy into the world, realizing that things can be both beautiful, and the idea of being deeply committed. Oh, thank you, Sarah Bodenson, for putting that in the chat. That's where you can look for more information about the Wide Awakes. Cut and paste it, it's worthwhile. But I think that this idea of how a deep commitment to wanting the world to be a better place and to doing the work that will be required from each of us in order to do that doesn't preclude thinking about beauty and joy and how the inspirational capacity of art also matters. And so it falls a little bit back into sort of the democratic idea of photography in general, is that not only do these things don't have to be combined, they can be parallel, and to believe in the importance of one isn't to diminish the importance of the other. Someone said they're inspired by cats. Yes, I should say I'm not a cat person. I have a big dog who's sitting right there, and he would be very offended if I said that I was a cat person. But I'll say this: I work with a lot of cat people, and there's nothing wrong with a good picture of a cliched cat that makes you happy. So I think, I think it can be all of these things. And for instance, Gordon Parks, who did the photographs, The Atmosphere of Crime, that are on view, he wanted to make works of art that made people pay attention and slow down and attend to these very important issues. But he understood that unless they were really compelling visually, no one, who was going to slow down for long enough to do that? So I think there's room for both. Okay, good. More cat references. So I didn't mean to offend the cat people out there when I talked about those being cliched, but I think it is important, the photoclubismo people, they loved their cats. I mean, cover after cover of cat pictures. And some of them are in the book. They're not in the exhibition though, because that's my judgment. Lynn, do you have any other questions or follow-ups or?
Well, the course, Seeing Through Photographs, was very challenging for me as a amateur photographer, because there was so much social relevance in the photographers that we studied. However, I have an activist life, which I'm trying to continue always to expand, especially in light of issues in the world. But I also have, photography is a diversion, another place to go, a chance to look for beauty and try and capture it. I do architecture, landscape. And so I struggle, especially after the course and
Yeah.
after what you just said. I mean, oh, should I be asking myself, is there a way I can combine the two always? But in one sense,
Yeah.
I need something completely different so that I can do the other work.
And I think that is so important. You know, in other words, partly I like Instagram because I just like going in and seeing what my friends' kids are doing. And I'm like, dun, 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 you know, and there's nothing wrong with embracing photography's capacity for inspiration and for distraction, you know, and I think you're right that the course is structured in a way around great artists who are able to harness both of these things together. But, and that also aligns with priorities for what the museum collects and displays. But that is not to diminish the fact that that seeing through photographs as an activity and photography as something, you know, that we all do can't be also just a personal endeavor and abstraction. And partly what I love about this photoclubismo project is that they are they give me a window in 2021 into what their priorities and thinking was in 1952, whatever. You know, they would write transcripts of their seminars where they would critique each other's work, and they were very, very serious about this. But it was a hobby. They were having fun. They did it on the weekends. They brought their children along. They did, and in part, what feels like a little bit of a triumph or a breakthrough is that this work was also in MoMA's collection in the 1950s, and that the effort to kind of create hierarchies and to make sense of photography, because it's a huge thing, has led to making these divisions that I personally would like to see broken down. I don't think that there's anything wrong. Just like I think that these photographers' work is great, I think that there's nothing wrong with making a picture that feels like something distinct from your activism. And there are ways of still studying and learning about photography that don't have to be poorly aligned with this. I will also just say one more word on that, is that in reading how complicated things were in the 1950s and in embracing all of this, I was reading the early issues of Aperture, in fact, and in the second issue of Aperture, Melton Ferris, who is one of the founders, he wrote on the editorial page, "Aperture is for the amateur and the professional, the pictorialist and the documentarian, the journalist and the scholar." And I thought to myself, how wonderful that in 1952, they saw no tension or competition between all those things. And I feel as if in the intervening decades, one of the problems is that we've said, like, oh, pictorialism, or oh, pictures of cats, or whatever. And it's like, actually, if we're really going to engage with what photography's potential is, it's all of that, and it is a hobby, and it can be something that isn't and I love that. Oh, and one more little tidbit about that. In the 1950s, 1951, Edward Steichen organized a show called Five French Photographers, and it had Cartier-Bresson, Brassai, Doisneau, Bouba, one more of them. Easy's. Okay. So these five photographers, and Steichen called them folk artists, which I'm pretty sure is the only time that Cartier-Bresson and Brassai have been called folk artists in their life. But I find it fascinating that that even in 1951, these categories and the statuses were much more fluid than we have come to accept. And so, let's think about the way that the work that you do as a, on your weekends is distinct and can be distinct from your activism and your day job and all of those other things without dismissing or demeaning it. So thank you. That was a great question. I appreciate it. Okay, 2:10, 20 minutes. I'm going to keep reading. So Bruce B is here, and he asked, was the so Bruce B, if you'd like to raise your hand, I would love to see you. He says, was the FCCB political like the Photo League? And thus, if so, did they have issues with the man like the Photo League did? Hi, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good, thanks. What do you mean by the man?
The government. We know what
Okay.
happened to the Photo League.
Yeah, okay.
Blacklist, McCarthy, etc. And that
Yeah.
would be inevitable for any activist. So I'm wondering if that happened there.
That is a really good question. And they were almost shockingly apolitical, I would say. And that actually was something I struggled with a little bit, meaning it was expensive to join the club. So it was a club that, it was a hobby, but it was a hobby if you had the luxury of having the disposable income to pay your annual membership. And I thought a lot about like, well, how does that align with what I value? And what I have come to conclude is that I try to appreciate in every project I work on that different, people are coming at photography, at art from so many different places. And that while their motive, they may have I should also add, Banderanch, this FCCB, the B in Banderanch, was, I would argue, a group of colonial marauders who destroyed the natural resources, who enslaved the indigenous people, not the kind of people that I would say whose activities I value. But it was very uncomplicated for them then. For the FCCB members, these were people who emanated from their region, from the Paulista region, and thus they felt in a moment where there was a lot of competition about whether Rio or Sao Paulo should be dominant in artistic circles. And yes, also, yeah, well, anyway, we'll get that this group would adopt the Banderanch as their, and the literal translation is standard bearers, which is great if you just think of it as being a pioneer. But the reality of it, we recognize today, was a lot more complicated. So no, they were not, obviously I wish that everyone I worked on a project with could be like Dorothea Lange or Gordon Parks, and where I would feel like A to Z, you make, not only does your art make my heart sing, but but your priorities, your ethics, your values do. This is not the case with these people, which is, and actually, in part, I should also qualify that to say, it could have been true for some of them. And for instance, Manarini, from what I understand, Ademar Manarini was one of the more socially active and engaged of the members. But I would say, from the perspective of New York, where I don't have, I have limited access to understanding, let alone original material and things like this. I can't speak for the politics of the group as a whole, but it is not clear to me from my perspective that it's anything like the Photo League, even though they had, the political problems in Brazil, the show is 1946 to 1964, which align closely both with artistic happenings when they started publishing their bulletin, but 1964 is when a new dictatorship took root. And so, they did, I'm not going to begrudge them, 2 decades of thinking just about photography. That's, but it is something I thought a lot about in them. So thank you. That was a great question. Appreciate it. Um, okay. Why don't, there are a few more questions about emerging artists. Maybe Gilles Z or GILZ, if you feel like maybe, anyway, just not to pick favorites. I'm not trying to pick favorites. I really want to be fair. But Gilles asked, can you name 3 steps of what an artist and photographer should do to level up their career? And so if you want to raise your hand and feel like chatting, great. And this is, oh, good. Hi. How's it going? Okay, you're muted, but we'll get you. Hi. So, hi. So I'll come back to your question. Let me just ask the other related question so that we're giving everyone a little. So Ivana asked, not Ivanka, just to be clear. Ivana T asked, when you do portfolio reviews as a MoMA curator, what do you look for in new and emerging works? Novelty, insights, relevancy. So this seemed like a question that maybe we could address at the same time as your question, but I'll give you a chance to oh, look, all of us together. Great. So why don't we let you each sort of, if there's anything you want to do to shift or reframe your question as I try to answer it, I'll try.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe just to say, oh, sorry.
That's okay, don't worry, there's room for both.
Yeah, just to say that you already talked about, yeah, so maybe what are your priorities when you see new work? You mentioned something about being real, the motivations. So what is that you look for in that?
Jill, you want to let me start and then you weigh in with the twist that I'm not anticipating? Oops. Can you hear me? All right, I'll try to answer that. And then Gilles, feel free to jump in and say, that's not at all what I was interested in. So the truth is, we are all bound by our, whatever taste means is an incredibly intuitive, personal thing. And I would say I am both cautious of seeing work that resonates with me on a personal level and holding up my sense of professional judgment that I've developed over the years against that. And they don't always work well together. Sometimes I really like something, but then I think, does that make it important? Does that make it of value? Should MoMA be collecting it? And so I think in part, my career, this most recent project in general, it is about thinking through how can you at least acknowledge that where taste factors in. And one of the things that I try to do at MoMA is to say, like, when I feel uncomfortable, when a work of art makes me feel uncomfortable or I don't understand it, that's a pretty good time for me to say, like, dig in and try to understand that better. Why is that the case? And so I would like to think that in looking at younger artists and art, that I will at least be aware of my own taste to a sufficient degree that I don't let it, while it may be the first thing, it can and should never be the last thing. So, and this, I mean, I had a conversation, I love a good panorama, but you can be sure that knowing that I love a good panorama means that when I see a panoramic work, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, do you like that just because you like panoramas? Or, I love a group shot. So whenever I see a picture with 100 people in it, I'm always like, oh, I love it. But that doesn't make it interesting or important. So I guess to your point of, and this ought to be true for everyone who's a responsible professional in the field, meaning you can say, I like this, but you need to be able to back it up. So Wendy Red Star, let's say, who was on Seeing Through Photographs with us, who participated in the Dorothea Lange project, she's somebody who work I immediately liked, but then I was like, wait, look at what her earlier projects were, look at what she's thinking about now. And, it's one of the reasons museums are so slow is that we look and we reflect and then we study and then we keep looking and then we reflect some more and then we have a conversation, and it makes for a very long drawn out thing, but it is meant to protect us a little bit from taste because taste is invisible and dangerous, I think, really. What you like, you can't control it, so all you can do is acknowledge it and then say, what am I ignoring because it doesn't align with that? So Gilles, you want to chime in? Ask me something else?
Yes, maybe I was thinking about maybe you have like some advices or a 3 steps guide for new artists or photographers. Like, what do you think they should do to level up their career? I know that isn't like a correct answer and it's very individual.
Okay, all right, let's give it a try.
I know, maybe some like a guide.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
I am woefully ill-equipped to answer this question. So let's just start with that. Like one of the reasons I became a photo historian was when I realized that I was a really bad photographer, but I still loved photography. It's like, well, then what else are you going to do? So I don't know, because I should say, looking at my own photography, it's much better on Instagram than it was when I was making prints. So, okay. Acknowledging that I'm woefully ill-equipped, I would say this. I would try to develop a thick enough skin that you can actually hear people's responses to your work. Because if you want people in the world beyond whatever intimate circle, your parents or whatever it is, if you want it to speak to beyond that, you have to have a thick enough skin in order to hear it. So maybe that's one. Let's say that step 2 is once you have a thick skin, we're going to come up with this list of other people and resources where you can try. The thick skin will come in handy because a lot of these other things, but try to get it out there. And I say that as if those words could make it true. I do have some appreciation for how difficult that is. And then I would say my last advice would be, and this is one of the reasons I don't go to see graduate students' shows, for instance, because I believe in doing something and then being willing to throw it aside and try something else. And that pressure to feel that if you've done something and you've achieved some success with it, and then having that feel like an inhibitor to trying something else because you've had a good response to that and people are liking it and hearing, and then you're like, oh gosh, but I'm the guy who does this, how could and to me, that's one of the hardest things about, or I should say, it's another way in which I knew I was never going to be an artist, because I was absolutely incapable of all of those things. But change is, speaking as somebody who's worked in MoMA since I was 22 years old, change is hard. And so anyway, trying as an artist not to be afraid of change, to embracing that, I think, but whoa. I don't know. Thank you for acting as if I could answer that question. I'm not sure. And okay. Why don't okay, I have 6 minutes. I'm going to try to be disciplined, but let me ask Pablo F if he wants to raise his hand, but I'm just going to apologize in advance. We're going to keep it quick. But if Pablo's here, And while you're raising your hand, Pablo, I'm going to read your question. Pablo wrote, to keep photography thriving, we need community. Few places have schools of art, let alone ones that include photography. While social media is great, institutions like Aperture, MoMA, and in the old days, photo clubs provide a structure for building community. What is the alternative today to build community in photography? Hi, Pablo.
Hello, hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
It's a really good question because I do think that many, not all, but many creative endeavors thrive through community. And it's, I think, it can start with your parents if they're really critical, or your children. My teenagers would love nothing more than to, critique everything I do. But I think to me, what seeing through photographs has offered is a way of thinking about a community, an online virtual community, mostly with people that we've never met. I do think when the world returns to normal, whatever your local art scene looks like, 9th Street women, yes, is to look local. And it's like where, there are actually still a ton of amateur photography clubs active all over the world. There are actually photography galleries in, not every major city, but most major cities and actually a lot of minor ones too. And any place where people are making things and wanting to talk about it, I think it's actually that willingness to talk about it, to sort of build a thick enough skin that you want to actually hear what somebody else has to say is important. And it's one of the things that I think the Photo Cine Club did so well, that they invited people from outside their world in. So Maria Freire was a painter, and she wrote a very, kind of critical piece about the Photo Cine Club's work, but they heard it. And it's like, that's, yeah, do you want to weigh in or comment or?
Yeah, well, I mean, just to say that I totally agree both on the local side and the value of something like seeing through photographs and creating community. I do think that the connection beyond the local is very important. And so activities like seeing through photographs help us all connect in the context of what photography has been historically and what it is currently. I live in the south of Mexico in a limited area in many ways, though
Looks
very
great,
rich.
by the way. I wish I were there.
Yes, no, it is. But having a way to connect to the broader world of photography and interact is, I think, something that is very valuable to not get lost in a reduced context.
And I think, the Photo Cine Club did this. They were a local group. They were anchored in their local Paulista pride, but they read and translated articles from magazines around the world and reproduced them in their little monthly bulletin. And they invited people who thought about the world differently than they did. Right. And I'll just to return to I don't know, there's a comedian in the United States named Jimmy Kimmel.
Yes.
And just to bring it back to Jimmy Kimmel, because why not? Jimmy Kimmel, when he was hosting the Academy Awards one year, it was probably 2017, if I'm going to guess, he said, find someone you disagree with and have a conversation with them. And he meant this in a political sense, but I think it's actually valuable in every sense of the word. If you can find somebody to have a conversation with who's willing to disagree with you, you're both likely to be changed by the experience. And so, okay.
Yeah, well, great that you're going to Aperture, and it's a great resource for all of us. So
I intend to keep it that way. So thank you. And, we will do a few more things before my last day. One about photoclubismo, I'm sure, But anyway, thank you all for joining today, taking time out of your busy days to be a part of Seeing Through Photographs. You have really changed my life, really. So thank you all, and stay safe, and you know, let's continue to see through photographs. So thank you all.